The entitled, aggressive people who turn minor inconveniences into full-scale meltdowns. But what happens when Karen's rage meets reality's unforgiving laws of physics? In this video, we're uncovering 6 Karens that died in the dumbest ways possible, entitled Behavior Leading to Fatal Consequences. It was March 12, 2015. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead at a busy supermarket in Dallas, Texas, casting their familiar harsh glow over checkout lanes filled with afternoon shoppers. Zora Delaney, a 48-year-old office administrator, stood clutching a crumpled coupon that would soon cost her everything. Zora had built a reputation over 2 decades of retail warfare. Working as an administrator for a mid-sized insurance company, she channeled her workplace frustrations into elaborate battles with store employees over expired coupons, return policies, and perceived slights. Her co-workers described her as someone who never backed down from an argument, no matter how trivial. She kept a folder of manufacturer coupons in her purse, many expired or clearly altered, and treated each shopping trip like a personal crusade against corporate injustice. Friends had long since stopped shopping with her, tired of the embarrassing scenes she created over a few dollar disputes. Checkout counters are designed for efficiency, not durability, with lightweight plastic partitions separating lanes to guide customer flow. The plastic partitions were attached to thin metal posts, which could bend or snap under sudden concentrated pressure. Additionally, exposed metal edges at the base of the divider or register frame created a hard impact point that could cause serious injury if someone fell against it. Store layouts prioritize maximum throughput, meaning safety features like reinforced barriers or cushioned flooring are often overlooked in favor of cost-effective materials that can be quickly replaced when damaged. That afternoon, Zora approached the express lane with a cart full of items and a coupon for a competing store's brand. The teenage cashier scanned the coupon, and the register returned an invalid barcode error, prompting her to explain it couldn't be accepted, triggering Zora's familiar escalation pattern. She demanded to speak with management, her voice growing louder as other customers began switching lanes to avoid the confrontation. When the store manager arrived and confirmed the coupon policy, Zora's anger reached a boiling point. She began gesticulating wildly, leaning heavily against the chrome-plated guide rail beside the scanner, while berating the staff about customer service standards. The guide rail shifted suddenly as its floor bolts gave way. As Zora leaned forward to emphasize her point about corporate greed, the metal post anchoring the partition snapped, and she tumbled backward. Her arms flailed, but she was unable to break her fall. Her head struck the rigid metal corner of the Bagwell frame beside the register before hitting the linoleum floor, the impact immediately knocking her unconscious. The sickening crack of skull-meeting metal echoed through the checkout area, immediately silencing her tirade and sending nearby shoppers scrambling backward in shock. Security cameras above the express lanes captured the entire incident, corroborating witness accounts of the divider giving way and Zora falling. Witnesses later described the horrifying sound and Zora's immediate unconsciousness. A customer called 911 while the store manager attempted basic first aid, but blood was already pooling beneath her head. Emergency medical services arrived within 5 minutes, finding Zora unresponsive with obvious signs of severe head trauma. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize her vital signs before rushing her to the nearest trauma center, where neurosurgeons discovered massive brain bleeding that proved impossible to control despite emergency surgery. She died 3 days later. The medical examiner's report listed acute subdural hematoma as the cause of death. The supermarket chain immediately reinforced all checkout partitions with heavier-duty metal posts and protective padding around edges, and implemented new customer service protocols for handling disputes. Zora's estranged daughter arranged a small funeral service, attended primarily by former co-workers. It was May 18, 2016. The morning air in Central Park carried the familiar sounds of awakening Manhattan, distant traffic, early joggers, and the persistent cooing of pigeons that had claimed the pathways as their territory. Thora Bishop, a 57-year-old retired elementary school teacher, stood near the park's maintenance area. Her daily war against the city's bird population was about to reach its final, fatal confrontation. Thora had spent 32 years teaching 4th grade at a public school in Queens, before retiring with a modest pension. Her neighbors in her Upper West Side apartment building knew her as the woman who aggressively shooed pigeons from fire escapes and building entrances, treating urban wildlife like misbehaving children who needed firm correction. She carried a small umbrella specifically for bird dispersal, and had been known to chase entire flocks down sidewalks while waving her arms and making loud noises. Her husband often joked that she fought birds with the same intensity she once brought to classroom management, never backing down from what she perceived as territorial disputes. Urban parks present unique hazards that blend natural and constructed environments. Maintenance areas typically feature concrete steps approximately 7 inches tall, metal railings, and service access points designed for park workers rather than public safety. These zones often have gates or fences restricting public access and lack the safety barriers found in main pedestrian areas, with steep drops and hard surfaces positioned near walking paths. Bird behavior in urban settings creates additional complications, as large habituated flocks can obscure sightlines and make humans move unpredictably while attempting to disperse them. That morning, Thora encountered an unusually dense flock of pigeons near the park's maintenance staircase. The birds had gathered around scattered breadcrumbs left by an earlier visitor, creating what she viewed as an unacceptable congregation that needed immediate dispersal. Ignoring the staff-only signs and yellow caution tape marking the maintenance area, she began her familiar routine of arm-waving and loud vocalizations designed to scatter the flock. The pigeons, largely indifferent to her gestures and habituated to humans, showed little interest in retreating, which likely intensified Thora's determination to establish control over the space. As the confrontation escalated, Thora began backing up to gain momentum for more aggressive gestures, completely focused on the birds while losing awareness of her surroundings. The maintenance staircase behind her descended 5 7-inch concrete steps to a landing approximately 2 feet deep, with a damaged handrail that would have offered minimal support. Several early morning joggers noticed her erratic movements but didn't care to stop. The concrete steps caught Thora completely off guard as she stepped backward during a particularly vigorous arm-flailing sequence. Her foot found empty air instead of solid ground, sending her tumbling headfirst onto the edge of the concrete landing, her momentum driving her cervical spine into the unforgiving surface with devastating force. 2 joggers witnessed the fall and immediately called 911 while attempting to check her vital signs. Witnesses who saw her movements confirmed she had ignored the restricted area signs, which was corroborated by the joggers' statements. Emergency medical services arrived within 7 minutes, but Thora showed no signs of consciousness or movement. Paramedics worked to stabilize her neck before transport, but she was pronounced dead at the hospital 30 minutes later, despite aggressive resuscitation efforts. The medical examiner determined that Thora died from a complete fracture of the C2 vertebra, caused by the head-first impact against the concrete landing edge. Thora's husband held a small funeral service, attended by former teaching colleagues who remembered her dedication to maintaining order in any environment. Following the incident, the city installed permanent low-level fencing around all maintenance staircases and added bird deterrent signage throughout the park. It was September 4th, 2014. The afternoon heat in downtown Atlanta created shimmering waves above the asphalt as city buses navigated their regular routes through streets filled with pedestrians heading home from work. Saskia Moss, a 42-year-old community volunteer, walked backward along the crowded sidewalk with her phone raised, completely absorbed in documenting what she perceived as another violation of public order. Saskia had dedicated the past 5 years to what she called community oversight. After retiring early from her job as a municipal clerk, she spent most afternoons patrolling downtown areas with her smartphone, filming teenagers she believed were loitering, jaywalking, or engaging in other minor infractions. Her social media accounts were filled with shaky footage of young people accompanied by lengthy captions about declining social standards and the need for citizen enforcement. She had been warned by police multiple times about confronting strangers and filming in traffic areas, but she viewed these warnings as attempts to suppress her civic duty. Downtown Atlanta's infrastructure includes uneven curb transitions, bus stops with varying elevation changes, and heavy pedestrian traffic that can obscure hazards. City buses operate on fixed routes with limited stopping distances, especially during peak hours when drivers must balance passenger schedules with safety concerns. The combination of distracted pedestrians, complex curb layouts, and large vehicles creates a dangerous environment where split-second awareness can mean the difference between safety and catastrophe. That afternoon, Saskia spotted a group of teenagers gathered near a bus stop, talking loudly and occasionally stepping into the street. She immediately began filming while approaching them, holding her phone at arm's length to capture what she intended to report as loitering and public disturbance. The teenagers noticed her filming and began moving away, which likely intensified her determination to document their behavior. She followed them along the sidewalk, walking backward to keep them in frame while narrating her observations for the recording. Focused entirely on her phone screen, Saskia lost awareness of her surroundings as she continued her pursuit. The sidewalk's uneven curb transition, where the concrete met the street level, created a 2-inch elevation change that she failed to notice. Her heel caught the raised edge as she stepped backward, sending her stumbling at an angle that positioned her pelvis directly under the rear wheels of an approaching city bus that was slowing for the nearby stop. The bus driver, traveling at approximately 15 miles per hour, had no time to react as Saskia fell into the vehicle's path. Due to her angle of fall, the rear wheels struck her pelvis and lower torso, crushing her immediately, while her upper body remained partially visible. Bystanders screamed and scrambled, while some immediately began calling for help. The bus driver slammed the brakes, but the damage was already catastrophic. Emergency services arrived within 4 minutes, but Saskia was pronounced dead at the scene. Police cordoned off the area and began interviewing the traumatized teenagers she had been filming. The medical examiner determined that Saskia died instantly from severe pelvic and lower torso crush injuries, which caused catastrophic internal bleeding and were fatal on impact. Atlanta city officials conducted a comprehensive review of pedestrian safety measures around bus routes, installing additional warning signs and improving curb visibility. Saskia's family held a private funeral service, requesting that her social media accounts be permanently deleted. It was July 22, 2017. The afternoon sun glinted off Lake Washington's deceptively calm surface as weekend boaters enjoyed the peak summer weather, unaware that the water temperature beneath remained a deadly 55 degrees Fahrenheit from the recent spring runoff. Raina Pullman, 36, had purchased a used fishing boat 3 years earlier as a weekend escape from her stressful job at a regional advertising firm. Co-workers described her as someone who bristled at any form of oversight or regulation, whether from supervisors at work or law enforcement on the water. She had received multiple warnings from Marine patrol officers for operating without proper safety equipment and had developed a reputation among local Coast Guard units for her hostile responses to routine safety checks. Her drinking had escalated over the past year following a difficult divorce, and she often combined alcohol consumption with solo boating trips as a form of stress relief that friends increasingly viewed as reckless behavior. Lake Washington presents unique hazards that many recreational boaters underestimate. Despite summer air temperatures reaching the 80s, the deep glacial lake maintains frigid water temperatures year-round due to snowmelt and underground springs. Cold water immersion triggers immediate physiological responses, including the involuntary gasping reflex, rapid heat loss, and sudden muscle incapacitation, which can cause drowning within minutes, even for strong swimmers. Small aluminum boats like Raina's offer minimal stability and can capsize easily when occupants shift weight suddenly, especially when alcohol impairs balance and judgment. The boat's narrow beam, only 4 to 5 feet across, made standing movements particularly hazardous. That afternoon, Raina had consumed at least 3 beers while fishing near the lake's eastern shore when she spotted a Coast Guard patrol boat conducting routine safety inspections of nearby vessels. Her previous encounters with Marine Patrol had resulted in citations for missing safety equipment, and she immediately became agitated at the sight of the approaching officers. Despite being several hundred yards away and not being targeted for inspection, she began shouting obscenities and gesturing angrily at the patrol boat while standing up in her small craft. The combination of alcohol, anger, and sudden movement in the unstable aluminum boat created a perfect storm of disaster. As Raina continued her tirade while standing, she began rocking the boat violently to emphasize her displeasure with law enforcement presence. Coast Guard officers watched in horror as the boat began listing dangerously to one side. The vessel's narrow beam and lateral instability meant that the center of gravity shifted past the tipping point, with even a slight overcorrection. The capsize happened with shocking suddenness. Raina's final angry gesture sent the boat past its tipping point, throwing her violently against the aluminum gunnel and rendering her briefly unconscious before hitting the water. She plunged into the 55-degree water already incapacitated from head trauma, triggering the cold shock response, gasping, muscle rigidity, and immediate difficulty coordinating swimming movements. Coast Guard officers immediately responded, but the distance of several hundred yards meant precious minutes elapsed before they could reach her location. They pulled Raina's unconscious body from the water within 4 minutes of the capsize, but she showed no signs of life. Despite immediate CPR and emergency medical protocols, she remained unresponsive during the helicopter evacuation to the regional trauma center. The entire rescue, from capsize to helicopter landing, occurred within approximately 15 minutes. The medical examiner determined that Raina died from drowning precipitated by severe hypothermia and blunt force head trauma. The head injury rendered her unconscious before immersion, preventing any survival response, while the frigid water accelerated physiological shutdown within minutes. Lake authorities installed additional signage, emphasizing mandatory life jacket use and cold water dangers throughout the recreational area. Raina's estranged family donated 50 life jackets to local boat rental services, hoping to prevent similar tragedies through improved safety awareness. It was April 15th, 2015. The spring morning in suburban Portland carried the familiar sounds of weekend yard work, distant lawnmowers, leaf blowers, and the occasional bark of neighborhood dogs. Maren Sweeney, a 52-year-old homemaker, stood at her living room window scrutinizing the property line between her meticulously maintained lawn and her neighbor's more casual landscaping approach. Maren had spent the 15 years since her early retirement from a clerical job obsessing over her quarter-acre suburban property. Her husband worked long hours as a regional sales manager, leaving her alone to wage daily battles against weeds, fallen leaves, and any perceived encroachment from neighboring yards. Neighbors described her as increasingly hostile over property disputes, often confronting them about minor issues like overhanging branches or grass clippings that crossed property lines. Riding mowers typically weigh between 400 to 600 pounds and feature exposed rotating blades spinning at over 3,000 RPM beneath the operator. Safety systems include blade engagement controls, seat switches, and protective housings. But these safeguards can fail when machines encounter unexpected obstacles or are operated outside normal parameters. Hidden rocks, tree roots, or uneven terrain can cause sudden directional changes that throw operators from their seats directly into the path of spinning blades designed to cut through thick vegetation. That morning, Maren discovered a cluster of dandelions that had spread from her neighbor's yard across the property line into her lawn. Rather than using appropriate hand tools for the narrow strip, she decided to use her riding mower to cut a precise boundary line along the fence. The area had never been mowed before due to its proximity to the property line and contained several large rocks buried just beneath the grass surface from previous landscaping projects. As she maneuvered the heavy mower along the narrow strip, the front wheel struck a basketball-sized granite rock hidden beneath the spring grass. The impact sent violent vibrations through the machine's frame while jerking the steering wheel from her grip. The sudden directional change threw Maren sideways off the seat as the mower tipped partially to the side, its blade still spinning, while the safety systems failed to engage quickly enough to stop the cutting deck. Maren's left arm became entangled in the mower's blade housing as she fell, the spinning metal cutting through her tight-fitting jacket sleeve and deep into her wrist and forearm. The razor-sharp blades severed both radial and ulnar arteries, sending arterial blood spraying across the freshly cut grass in rhythmic pulses. The sound of spinning blades and her screams alerted two neighbors, who witnessed the accident and called 911 immediately. Emergency medical services arrived within 6 minutes, finding Maren unconscious in a pool of blood beside the partially overturned mower. Despite aggressive resuscitation efforts and immediate transport to the trauma center, she had lost too much blood to survive the arterial damage within minutes. The medical examiner determined that Maren died from exsanguination due to severed arteries in her left wrist and forearm. Her funeral drew a modest attendance of distant relatives and a few co-workers from her former job. Neighbors privately expressed relief that the constant property disputes had ended, though none voiced these sentiments publicly during the brief memorial service. It was October 9th, 2016. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sprawling parking lot of a big box retail store in northern New Jersey, where weekend shoppers navigated between rows of cars and delivery trucks making their regular supply runs. Alyssa Vance, a 29-year-old administrative assistant, emerged from the store's automatic doors clutching a shopping bag and wearing the familiar expression of someone who had just lost a very public argument. Alyssa worked as an administrative assistant for a small accounting firm in Newark, earning modest wages that made every purchase decision significant. Over the past 2 years, she had developed a reputation among local retail workers for aggressive return attempts, often bringing back clearly used items without receipts while demanding full refunds. Store managers knew her by name and had flagged her account for suspicious return activity. She had been banned from 2 other retail chains for disruptive behavior and had accumulated several trespassing warnings from security personnel who recognized her increasingly erratic patterns. Large retail parking lots present complex traffic environments where pedestrians, passenger vehicles, and commercial delivery trucks converge in spaces designed primarily for vehicle efficiency rather than pedestrian safety. Delivery trucks, often weighing over 26,000 pounds when fully loaded, require extended stopping distances and have significant blind spots that can completely obscure pedestrians. These vehicles operate on tight schedules with drivers focused on navigating loading zones and avoiding passenger car traffic, creating dangerous conditions when pedestrians move unpredictably through vehicle travel lanes. The area Alyssa chose to cross lacked painted crosswalks or pedestrian signage, making her path particularly unsafe. That afternoon, Alyssa had spent 45 minutes arguing with customer service representatives about returning a damaged electronic item without a receipt. When store policy prevented the return, she became increasingly agitated, demanding to speak with multiple managers while other customers waited in line. Security footage later showed her concealing additional merchandise in her bag during the heated exchange. When the final manager upheld the return denial, Alyssa stormed toward the exit while store security began following her, suspecting theft of the additional items she had taken during the confrontation. Realizing that security was pursuing her, Alyssa likely panicked and began running across the parking lot toward her car, parked in a distant row. Instead of using designated pedestrian walkways, she cut directly through active traffic lanes where delivery trucks were maneuvering toward loading docks. She failed to notice a large delivery truck entering the lot from the main access road. The collision occurred in the center traffic lane as Alyssa sprinted between parked cars without checking for oncoming vehicles. The delivery truck, traveling at approximately 25 miles per hour while approaching the loading zone, struck her with devastating force. The impact threw her body several feet forward and partially pinned her under the truck's dual rear wheels. The sickening crunch of bone and metal grinding against asphalt was audible to horrified shoppers who immediately began screaming and calling for help. Multiple witnesses called 911 simultaneously, while the truck driver, initially unaware of the impact due to blind spots created by parked vehicles and the truck's design, continued toward the loading dock until other shoppers flagged him down. Emergency medical services arrived within 8 minutes, but Alyssa was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner determined that Alyssa died instantly from massive blunt force trauma, including crushing injuries to her skull, chest, and pelvis. The retail chain implemented enhanced parking lot safety measures, including additional pedestrian warning signage and painted crosswalk lanes throughout the vehicle traffic areas. Alyssa's family held a private funeral service attended by close relatives and a few co-workers who remembered her more for her workplace dedication than her confrontational retail encounters. Thanks for watching. If you liked these stories, click here